This should be a lot of fun for people who have all this time been following my ongoing hack job on the game Legendary Lives. Um, Basically, adapting, extracting, adding what I feel like for an inspired by it, but different and toward my own ends adaptation. Totally for fun. And it has proceeded mainly through the Patreon. So there's lots of characters there or some play talk there. And last year, in the fall and into the winter, we played a pretty extensive game of it at Spelens. Now, most of the people playing were new to the group, and some were new to role playing. And I didn't really want the cameras rolling, to change the atmosphere for them. So we didn't record it. I think it's probably best to discuss it in terms of what it's like to be working on a role playing game strictly for fun. I don't have a publishing plan. If it ever does turn into sort of a sheaf of things that somebody could read, then I'll be making it available for free as a celebration of Legendary Lives, basically. And perhaps a look at some aspects of game design. One of those aspects is numerical. In terms of just probability work, I reviewed the math for Marvel superheroes. Its famous resolution table. You can actually see this discussed in the seminar. In a whole discussion we held about it and about probabilities. And I adapted the action resolution table, or ART, at Legendary Lives and redid all the numbers. So now it has its own resolution system, or at least the probability distribution that operates more similarly to Marvel superheroes, although it uses the same kind of language and points and things of Legendary Lives. Now, you can review that seminar if you want to see why or what was on my mind. But this game is the one where we actually used that. So I got a good look at, kind of how the numbers felt. Well, the good news is that I'm quite happy with it. The differences in the profiles of the characters' numbers seemed to be nicely represented throughout play in different ways, but still with the importance of the extreme results. So in this, it played nicely. Now, a few other things. I have a way of, when I see something in play, like one of the types, then I am able to write up a rather good working document for it. And the same thing for the races. Before that, I have notes and I can't really put the sentences together, and it feels as though I'm, making a fabrication rather than working rules. So in this case, due to the people's roles and so forth, we got to see races in play that I had not yet seen. Now, one of them was the exception. Emil rolled a robot and he chose a killer. And now that I have new rules for how the robots get their names, it turns out that those rules landed him with 13. So this is a lot like Helma's character in the previous game we played, where she played a killer robot named 13. But anyway, this is a totally different robot, totally different character, different lifelines and stuff like that. But if I talk about 13, the killer robot, now you have to know which one I mean. But aside from that, most of the rolled things I had not yet seen in play. So we actually ended up with a fairly motley bunch of results, including an orb and an ooze and a naga and a bug person, in addition to the robot. So that meant I got to write a lot for both those races, and then also the array of types that they chose, many of whom had not been played before. I had a lot of scope for coming up with new content that worked. Things that I was working off what we had experienced, and then other things that popped into place because of that. And, I was able to turn those things into actual sentences and verbs and stuff like that. So that's nice. Very productive in that regard. Now, what made this more raucous than most play has to do with the sort of jumbled means by which we came together as attendance and sessions and things are concerned, and also plans changing on us. Specifically, this game uses very character-centric scenario creation. It's very artificial. In fact, you look at the character sheets and from there create literal, background content and things that would not otherwise have been created. And I speak of it as almost irresponsible setting building. The only logic is because these two characters happen to be being played, and that's why this means this and that means that. It's not at all. It has no integrity coming from anywhere else. With 5 characters, that's a little crazy. It's not impossible, but it is impossible when you begin by just coming up with one character for fun with one person because the two of you have nothing better to do and playing a little. And then other people say they want to play, and so then you sit down with a few of them and you make up characters, but you see that one character's already been played a little. And then they have to go and look at all their lifelines and figure out like what order they want them in. And then you start playing too soon on top of that, and then a 5th person deals themselves in, and then you play, and then all together, and then one person misses the next session, and it really becomes, it did not gel. We never had this smooth or ordered process that Whimsical Ways really needs, where the characters are made, little bit of review among them, the players figure out what things hook together, and the game master says, oh well, obviously the 3 of you know each other, you were imprisoned and you were on the run, and okay, you guys are clearly a little gang of crooks, you just are. You two, well, oh look, you've got the same like thing on your lifelines, and the players say, yeah, we visited that place together, so now you're traveling home together from it. Okay, I get it. So that's actually surprisingly easy given all the different angles on a given character, but not if you do it in this jumbled way that I'm talking about. We end up with a mess of play where right there in the session I'm saying things like, oh well, you two know each other because of this, or well, you're here and you're here, and really it's not. To talk about lack of integrity, this is lack of integrity that's not irresponsible fun. This is lack of integrity, which is basically not good play. I'm basically shoehorning things together that may well have been put together legitimately before, but now is being done as kind of a way of scene framing, and telling people what they care about. That's not so good. People either put up with it or didn't really know, the extent to which I was doing it, or they basically said, okay, well, this is how we play, I guess. But it made for a mess, and it didn't have that kind of click-in ownership of what's going on and why I'm here and what I'm doing that's really good in this game otherwise. Now, all of that did eventually work out. We played a number of sessions, and by the 3rd or 4th, I would say things were actually very strong in that regard. But it really didn't have a nice clean takeoff the way I would much prefer it to have done. And ultimately, the fact that things tended to get shouted into play because of what I had to do or had done in order to just have things happen at all in the beginning, made for that raucous quality. That wasn't always, wasn't even a bad thing really, but it was a bit more of a kind of a rough and tough experience of play, not in a sort of competitive way, but people push systems as well. They were trying to see, well, if I can just jump in like that, then let's push this and see how far that goes. I don't really mind that in terms of like seeing what the rules do. but it was kind of ungoverned in a more collective social sense. Okay, so that was going on, and what about the content? Well, just to give you an example, there were the 5 characters, and one example is Denicha's orb, which is she chose the space wizard type. The orb's origin used to be a house alarm. Most of the orb backgrounds are things like that, and is sinister and serious, committed to the sect of the orb's religious practices called Inward Bound. And Denicha was delighted to discover that you get these different magical little schools or sets of concepts for being a space wizard, but then you get to choose which one of these customizable spell modifying spells you get. And one of them is called Depth. Oh, wow, I worship the Inward Bound, and I seek the Inward Bound path, and my magic is, focuses on depth, and I get to float around, and I can. So she got pretty into the magic rules. Let's see here. Right, all about the Inward Bound. Wants to build a temple for the Inward Bound. Got their the reputation ruined from an enemy, and then there was an imperial warrant out on this orb, sold into slavery for 6 years, which has something to do with the house alarm part, I think, and all sorts of stuff like this. And Denicha kind of rounded this out, made a through line with a relationship character. So even though she didn't roll a relationship, she sort of divined by looking at these that there has to be a through line character in there. And so, oh no, there it is, lover. There is a lover thing that happened. So she did have a lover to work with, but turns the lover into a cool through line. So it was a really nice little background that made for this sort of cool, grim, spiritual, floaty character determined on this inward bound path. Oh, but all about this lover, and the goal was to try to reconcile the whole relationship. So the whole thing turned out to be about love instead. So anyway, you can't ask for a better, Whimsical Ways character. And Joy's character Plop, the ooze, was similarly full of romantic strife. So that's funny too. The orb and the ooze, the 2 least human characters, are the 2 that are just radiating love crisis. So anyway, that's kind of fun. With 5 characters, again, in this game, the content gets really crazy, and a given situation to play in is certainly not going to account for every last little detail for each one, which, on the basis of plain old fictional content alone would be stupid. So I had to kind of, look about for what components of each character were, operative, or were part of this situation. And you can see lots of little scrawls in the preparation material, trying to get a grip on that, particularly in that kind of unconstructed or disordered beginning of everybody making stuff up, and then we play a little, and then this person's here, but that person's not here, and all sorts of things got, jumbled. So what else do I have to tell you about? Let's see. Working on the rules themselves. I brought up Denicha's orb because I, of course, need to have magic rules. And I had some ideas on magic rules. And I kind of liked, Denicha said, okay, so where are the magic rules? Ready to go. And I pulled out this crap set of like an old printout with just scribbles on it. She's kind of like, seriously? And I was like, yeah, let's just start with that, and I'll bring a better printout next time. So there's a series of printouts, each one with scribbles on it, as the rules get developed. And they ended up, I think, in pretty usable shape. You kind of have to know the Legendary Lives rules in order to see what I'm talking about in them, because I'm not writing a rule book right now. I'm just saying, all right, we've got Legendary Lives here, and then here are a bunch of these, these papers that I've got. But now I can say, I know how magic works in whimsical ways. What about places to be? One of the things about all these little lifelines and stuff like that and other aspects of character creation is that places are quite important. And it so turned out that some sort of mysterious citadel that could be accessed by a dream or through a drug-induced hallucination or a prophecy of an actual vision. Well, there were several of those scattered across, and I said, okay, that's easy enough. That's all the same place. And so that place was born. I dug through my maps. Dyson Logos has a nice map that's this kind of a squished tower, a tower that looks like somebody like held the top of it and like squished it down into the earth. It's busted in half, and it seemed just right. And so then I found another map, which was this fortress, like a coastal fortress, and I said, all right, well, the top half of this is actually a public building, and that's a visible building, because that was part of one of the lifelines. There was a public use building, but it had a mysterious structure underneath it. That was one of the things that I put together to make this place. So, okay, so I knew it had to be some sort of place, but that's why I picked the tower thingy, because I said, oh, look, part of it's above ground. That'll be the public use place. So figured this out. And of course, it gets weirder and weirder because of all the mystical stuff going on. And given the nature of the game, I found myself racing ahead. I did not want to be improvising this tower into existence either during play or just one session before play. I wanted a little bit more grounding of what was in it and why, at least a couple sessions ahead of, touching those places. So I found myself scribbling a lot, and a lot of it didn't make a lot of sense. And I ended up forcing it to make more sense, or having the lack of sense end up being, well, I guess that's just weird. So certain things happened, though, that did click together nicely in sort of a what the hell, that's how it is kind of way, which definitely has its charm and worked out well, at least in this case for this game. So anyways, I think that's about it. Do I have any other little pieces of paper I wanted to show you? I've got some some of the scribblings I did about the tower. The ones in readable handwriting, you can tell those are later stages in the prep, because that means that I took a bunch of awful looking things and sort of extracted things and wrote them down in a better order. So if you see this kind of, nicely ordered, text like that, then that that there's a bunch of really nasty looking text and scribbles preceding it. I think you'll be able to see just how much I was trying to relate things across the character sheets in some of those prep notes as well. A process which ends up pretty fun, I would say, for this game. And I'm looking forward to doing more of it in slightly more ordered form as soon as I can, really.